Hi, I'm McKenna, and I'm going to do the obedience to authority experiment by Stanley Milgram. Who is Stanley Milgram? He was a behavioral scientist. He was also a professor at Yale University. He was born in 1933 in New York City, and he was born into the Bronx area, and he was also born into a Jewish family. So this Jewish background that he had made him really motivated and determined to find out more about the Holocaust and like what happened and why it got what led to that. He also died December 20th, 1984 at the age of 51 due to his 5th heart attack. And I also found that he went to high school with Zimbardo, who was pretty much the person who did the Stanford prison experiment, which was an interesting fact that I found. And if any of you don't know what the Holocaust is, it was the genocide of the European Jews during World War II between 1941 and 1945. So the overview of the study. For recruitment, he used newspaper at first. He sent it out to the New Haven, Connecticut community. There was 300,000 people in that community, and he only got 296 responses out of that. So at first they did think about using Yale undergrad students because he was a professor at Yale and this took place at Yale in a laboratory. But he thought it was too much of a risk because they all were the same age and they knew too much of psychological experimentation, so he thought getting people with a variety of different careers and education ages was the best way to go. He also said that he wanted males for this experiment, so that's what took place in this first experiment that he did. There also wasn't enough people that responded in the first time that they sent it out in the newspaper, so they actually sent it out mail invitations to thousands of other people in the community and got a 12% of return rate from that. This is the newspaper article thing that they used to recruit people, and like I said, there was no criteria besides men that they wanted to do this experiment. So for this procedure, there was 3 people involved. There was 2 in one room, as you can see in the picture. There's 2 people in one room, which was the experimenter and the teacher, and then the learner was in the other room, and the learner was then attached to an electric chair or electrodes, but he actually wasn't getting these shocks that the learner or the teacher and experimenter were seeing. So then in the other room, the teacher would, it's all confusing. So the subject right there, as you see, has that machine in front of him, and he would read like blue box or blue box, nice day, or wild duck, and then he would be like, okay, I said blue, can you like match between sky, ink, box, lamp, and he had to choose the right answer. So if he chose like blue sky, he would then be incorrect, and then the subject would then have to shock the learner in the other room that was connected to all this stuff, but he actually was not getting shocked, but it was like acting pretty much. So once the shock started to get more intense, there was feedback like, ouch, that hurt, or I have a heart condition, or something along those lines. They kind of had lines that the learner kind of had lines like beforehand of like what he was supposed to say, and so once the shock started getting like to like 300s, that's when he started to like say feedback. So like I posted on there, the shocks were 15-volt increments, so like it would go from 15 to 450 volts. So when there was feedback from the learner, the subject would then start to get really distressed because, I mean, you're hurting someone and it makes you really stressed out. So the subject or the teacher would then look for the experimenter for help, and the experimenter's job was pretty much just to be like, you have to continue, like we require for you to continue, but they did have the option to opt out at any point, and they knew that beforehand. So like I said, the location, it took place in a laboratory at Yale University, and the experimenter and the victim/learner that I was talking about, the experimenter was a 31-year-old high school biology teacher, and the victim or learner was a 47-year-old accountant, and these people were chosen beforehand. So the main experiment was honestly just revolved around the teacher, and the teacher didn't know that. So so these people were just already determined before the experiment, and they were already trained for their role and knew what to do beforehand. And the biology teacher had to actually dress up in a gray trench coat to make it seem like he was more of the authority figure, so that the teacher would just feel more like tensed up, or just knew that this person was like the main guy here and he knew what he was doing. So my question to you guys is, has there ever been a situation where you were told to do something you didn't feel comfortable doing, but you still did it anyway? And then I found this quote in the Obedience to Authority book written by Stanley Milgram, on page 3. It says that you will find more hideous crimes that have been committed in the name of obedience than have ever been committed in the name of rebellion. So leading up to this event, here's a timeline of like why this all started. Like I said, Stanley was very passionate about the Holocaust and Nazis and why they did this stuff. And as you can see, when it came to power, Stanley Milgram was actually born in August that same year they came to power. And then he went to, the verdict in 1946 happened for the 10-month-long Nazi war crimes, and then he graduated from Queens College, majoring in political science in 1954. He then started school at Harvard that same year on August. And Milgram also studied under Solomon, who did the conformity study, which then kind of influenced him to start the Obedience to Authority experiment in 1961 in July. And then in 1963, he published the papers of his research that he conducted. And then in 1975, he was then nominated for National Book Award. And then in 1984, he sadly died due to his 5th heart attack. So here's a picture of like what the shock things looked like in front of the teacher. And it's very interesting because, I don't know if you can see, yeah, it says like slight shock, moderate shock. It kind of like goes through levels. So like you know when you're shocking someone really bad, and again by the feedback that was given from the learner. So results and details of the event. We found that we like to see ourselves in a favorable light. A lot of people before the experiment said that they would have never imagined hurting an innocent person or doing this to an innocent person or anything, or shocking someone in this case, and 65% of them went all the way to 450 volts, and then all of them went to the minimum of 300 volts. And like I said before, they all were like, I would never do this, but they all did it. So what events changed this field? It brought up a lot of ethical issues in this experiment. The care and well-being of participants were really looked at, negative emotional impact on subjects, and this experiment is honestly the reason why the American Psychological Association established rules for working with humans, and it's also the reason that the Institutional Review Board exists today. In conclusion, they found that we tend to obey orders from people who seem more knowledgeable or educated about a situation, and we also obey either out of fear or out of wanting to seem cooperative. Resources? Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Did they see the person being shocked before the experiment?
No, they didn't see them, like, well, they saw them get, like, hooked up,
Okay.
but they didn't see them, like, actually get shocked.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
I was gonna say, so they paid them $4 to like participate
Yeah.
in the experiment. I know like we talk about if there's like too much incentive. In
Yeah.
that time frame, was $4 a lot of money or no, not really?
I don't believe so. I mean, it was based in, like, the 1960s, so it wasn't too much. As, like, compared to now, like, yeah, I mean, it seems like a little, but, I mean, it was still in the 1960s, like, I wouldn't think it would be that much. Did you have a question?
Yeah, was the experimenter's job to, like, try to push the, let's say the, like, experimenter, the person who was, messing with the, like, basically administering the shocks even though they weren't actually doing it?
Yeah.
Was it their job to push them, or were they, like, more expected to, like, let them, like, progress on their own?
So, honestly, the only time they would, I mean, their job was to push them and be like, you need to continue, but they only would do it unless, like, they seemed distressed or would be like, I can't keep doing this, and then they would say, like, okay, you need to continue, or just something like that. But they really wouldn't say anything unless they noticed that distress happening and the person saying something to them first.
How immediate were the IRB and the ethical concerns and all that kind of stuff? How immediate did that happen after the Milgram study?
I didn't see a specific date about that, so I mean, I can get back to you with that after class, but I just saw that they were established, like, after it, but I don't know a specific date.